Welcome to the FemiNinja Project, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Show. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilov, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, and I just wanted to start today by asking you a really simple question. And I want you to start thinking about it, because I'll bet it's something you've never thought of before. And that is, how many times a day do you say the words, "I'm sorry"? You probably never thought about it before, and why would you? But it's really an interesting question, and it's an important one as well, because a lot of times we say those words, "I'm sorry," when we really have neither done anything wrong, or there's nothing wrong in the first place. And it's almost like it just comes out of our mouth, blah, I'm sorry, blah, whatever. And women do it a lot more than men do. We're really, as women, so good at it. That's all we say all day long. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Are we really sorry for everything that's going wrong? And it's not just women who are doing it, it's girls and young girls as well. And I don't even know when that started, because I remember thinking back as a little girl when I was growing up, and even as a teenager, I don't remember women and girls making this compulsory type of response, "I'm sorry." It's almost like, "Hello, I'm sorry." Everything, is just a knee-jerk reaction, almost like Pavlov's dogs. And again, I don't know when this happened, but it can be a real problem. And maybe you might think, well, it's not that big of a deal, but really notice how many times a day that you say that. And when you say those words, "I'm sorry," do you really need to be apologizing for something? And what are you apologizing for, or who are you apologizing to? And I know I'm making a really big deal out of this, and there's a reason. Because every single time we say, "I'm sorry," and we have not done anything wrong, we're actually chipping away at our personal power. And we're literally handing it over to somebody else, typically the person that we're apologizing to. And it can really be a bad habit, because and maybe it is a habit, and maybe you don't even realize that you're doing it. And so that's why I'm trying to bring attention to it. I want you to train your awareness and notice how many times a day you say this. And as you're doing that, as you're noticing when you say it, again, pay attention to, why are you saying it? And did you really need to apologize to this other person? And then notice how you feel inside when you're saying those words, "I'm sorry." Do you feel strong? Do you feel confident? Do you feel empowered? Or do you feel like your self-confidence is just starting to shrivel? And that's what I call it excessive apology disorder. I actually came up with a name for it because it does seem to be so prevalent in our society right now. And I think it's something that we really need to be careful of, because not only, again, are you taking on this responsibility that you have done something wrong, you're actually, again, chipping away at your personal power. But when you're saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," then when you really do need to apologize for something, it loses its sincerity. And it comes across as being hollow and shallow and meaningless, and sometimes even sarcastic. And that's really not something that you want to do. But, I remember a time when I apologized for everything. I really did. I felt like everything was my fault. Everything that was going on in the world that was bad, world hunger, human trafficking, PMS and menstrual cramps, everything, you name it, I apologized for it. I was sorry, 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 and it was wearing me down. I mean, I felt so terrible about myself, and there were a lot of other things in my life going on at the same time. So it wasn't just that, and it could have been that my self-esteem and my self-confidence had been taken such a beating that I felt like, well, why not? Let me take on everything else in the world that's going on. And I remember telling this to a friend of mine. She was a client of mine and a chiropractor, and a wonderful woman. And I remember telling her one day, I said, Susan, everything is my fault. I am responsible for everything. Everything in the world that's going wrong. And I repeated the, human trafficking, world hunger, menstrual cramps, etc. And she looked at me and said, now, that's not true. And I mean, I was just going through such a rough time, and I just looked at her with big weepy eyes. And she said, because it's my fault. So we really got a good laugh out of that. And it really taught me something that, we do take on so much responsibility of things that we really have no control over. And it's really not our fault. We haven't done anything wrong. But as I said, it's something that really does chip away at our personal power. So it just is so harmful to our self-esteem and our emotional well-being. And recently, when I was thinking about this quite a bit, that's when I came up with the little term, the excessive apology disorder. I'm surprised that nobody has coined that phrase before, because it really is a problem. And again, as when you suffer from, I call it suffering from EAD, you're slowly but consistently chipping away at your personal power and relinquishing it to another person, typically the one that you're apologizing to. But again, it's just you don't even notice it at first because it's a slow burn. It's just a slow chip. But what you're doing is you're actually training your brain, because your brain doesn't know the difference between right or wrong or imagination and reality. So it just takes the information that it hears and it logs it into, the pathways, again, just like a computer, and you're getting that signal, that reinforcement that I'm sorry, I'm bad, I've done something wrong, and it just really begins to tear down your self-confidence, and it also allows for the chronic and nagging voice of self-doubt to come creeping in. And that eventually leads to guilt and shame. You never thought about it that way, did you? So now that I've kind of set the stage and planted the seed, I want you to start paying attention to it. And notice every single time you say those words, I'm sorry. Number one, did you do something wrong? Do you really need to apologize to the person? Number two, how do you feel when you say those words? Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel like, oh, I've made something right because I did something wrong? I've either harmed someone or offended someone, and I need to do that so I feel better about myself? Or do you feel confident? Do you feel strong? Do you feel proud of yourself? Or do you feel beaten down? Do you feel like your chest starts to sink a little bit and your self-confidence just starts to shrivel? So it's just something to pay attention to, because it really is a huge problem. And then again, like I said, if you do need to apologize for something, it comes across as insincere and, again, even sarcastic. And that's not good either. But when I had excessive apology disorder, it was so bad that I would actually even apologize to strangers in the grocery store when they would ram me with their shopping carts. Oh, I'm sorry, because I must have been in their way. Or if somebody cut me off in traffic, even as I was driving, I would say it out loud, I'm sorry. And then I would feel like I did something wrong. And boy, that is a spiral that once that starts to just go out of control, it's really hard to break that cycle. But it can be done. So all you have to do is be aware of how many times you apologize when you have nothing to be sorry for. Very simple. Once I stopped saying I'm sorry to everyone and everything, I could feel my self-confidence return. And I felt my personal power begin to surge. And I even stood taller. My posture was better. And I would look people in the eye. And I could find my voice and stand my ground. I even learned how to say no. But I'll save that story for another day because it's a really, really good story. But anyhow, that's something I want you to think about. And that is kind of your challenge for the week. But I'm going to let you know how I was cured of EAD, or how it was brought to my attention. And that was in my martial arts training. And I had probably been training, oh my goodness, for at least 2, maybe 3 years, because I was at the level of my green belt. And I was getting ready to test. And once you get to that level of the green belt, you're not just, defending yourself by evading and running away. You're starting to learn how to counterattack, and you're starting to learn how to get a little bit closer to your attacker. So having said that, that means that your counterattack is a lot more brutal than it was in the lower levels. So I was getting ready to do the test, and I had one of the black belt instructors, big brawny guy by the name of Aaron, and he was going to be my partner. So he was going to be attacking me, and I was going to beat him up, which I thought was very nice of him, because after all, what are friends for? He and I had become good friends, and we had trained together quite a bit, and he was kind of one of my mentors, took me under his wing and would help coach me. And so we had worked a lot together. And as I said, he was a great big brawny guy, not only a martial artist, but hockey player, skier, athlete, and quite a bit younger than me. But anyway, we made kind of an unusual partnership, but it worked. What can I say? So we started the test, and when you start a test in my martial art, there's quite a bit of ceremony before the test. You're bowing and scraping is what I call it, but you're really paying respect not only to your sensei, your teacher, but the kamidana, the shrine in the front of the dojo, and to your partner as well. So it's a very serious ritual to go through a test, and you have got to be prepared, very well prepared. And it's just, again, showing respect not only to your teacher, to the art, to your partner, but to yourself as well. So we went through the whole ritual, the beginning, and then the test began. And about 15 minutes into the test, Mark, my sensei, stopped. And he looked at me, and he actually even pointed his finger directly at me, which is something that you really shouldn't do in the dojo. But hey, he was the sensei, so he could do whatever he wanted. And he pointed his finger at me, and he said, "If you apologize one more time for doing a technique well, I am going to stop the test." Well, that's kind of the worst thing anybody could say, is that they're going to stop the test, because it's like the epitome of embarrassment and, the epitome of failure as a martial artist if you are so ill prepared for a test that sensei actually has to stop it and not pass you. But, here I was doing this test. All my partner's job was to attack me. My job was to defend myself. What could possibly go wrong? Every single time Aaron attacked me, I took him down. And I took him down hard. And it's really kind of funny, because for such a big, strong, burly guy, he sure did yelp a lot and screech a lot. But again, I just kept going on, and that's when Mark had stopped the test, and he told me that. And he gave me such a cold, hard look. And again, he said, "If you apologize one more time, I'm going to stop the test." He says, "Because you're doing what you're supposed to do." And I thought, oh my God, that was such a bad sign. So again, having sensei stop a test was just so supremely embarrassing and the epitome of failure. So I just froze for a split second before I replied. And when I did, guess what I said? Oh, just guess. Instead of bowing and saying, "Hi, sensei," which would mean, "Yes, teacher," I said, "I'm sorry." Well, my partner gasped, and sensei glared at me, and I was horrified, and I was so embarrassed, because I didn't even realize that every single time I took my partner down, I said I was sorry before he even hit the ground. So think about it. I was actually apologizing for defending myself. How insane is that? But sensei didn't stop the test. He just gave me a very knowing look, as well as another stern warning. But he really did me a huge favor that day, and I learned a very important lesson. But it was funny, as I went through the next part of the test, I caught myself how many times I was just ready to blurt out, "I'm sorry." And that day actually changed my life forever. I'm not saying that I recovered from the excessive apology disorder right there at that very day, but at least it made me aware. So I started paying attention how many times that I said it, and how often I was compelled to apologize when I didn't even have to. And that's when I started to notice how often other women said it. And I started to pay attention to their body language and their demeanor when they did. And it was so revealing because you could just see them start to shrivel in front of me. And you can see their posture change, that, instead of having that nice lifted chest and their head up, they would just start to crumble, like their chest would start to cave, the head would come down, and you could even see it in their eyes. Something changed. So that's what I want you to do, is notice in your travels as you're paying attention to how many times that you're saying you're sorry. Notice how many times other people, especially women and girls, are saying it too. You might even want to team up with a really good friend and monitor each other and help encourage each other not to do that. Because why would you chip away at your personal power? Why would you beat yourself up? Trust me, there are plenty of other people out there who would like to beat you up anyway. So don't do it to yourself. So just to really be able to pay attention to that and just change that pattern. When you change that pattern and stop saying you're sorry all of the time, then again, that's going to change the pathways in your brain so that you won't have that sense of self-confidence just absolutely being torn down, and your self-confidence and your self-doubt and your self-image will start to improve. And by self-image, I don't mean that the self-esteem, like, oh, hey, I'm so rough and tough. No, it's just you want to have the same kind of respect for yourself that you're showing for other people. So anyway, that's just one point that I wanted to bring up because it is that important. And when I see people or hear people doing it constantly, it just kind of breaks my heart. And I even was in a dance store a couple of days ago, and I was buying new ballet slippers. I mean, they're just ballet slippers. And the lovely young lady who was waiting on me, every time, she just kept saying, I'm sorry, oh, sorry, oh, sorry. And I says, what are you so sorry for? I just couldn't help myself. And I said it in a gentle way. And I said, isn't that interesting? You just keep saying that. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And I thought, there you go again. So we got a good chuckle out of it. But I encouraged her. I says, the next time I come here to buy ballet slippers, I want you to wait on me again. And I want to see if you were able to change that habit, because that's all it is. It's a habit. But we don't know, or we don't really appreciate how much harm we're actually doing to ourselves. So again, this is your challenge, to notice how often that you do say you're sorry, and don't say it out of habit or because you think the other person expects it. Because most of the time, you have nothing to apologize for. And remember, everything is not your fault. So that is all I have to say about that. It's something very small, but it's something very important. And it's something that's going to help you not only improve your self-confidence, but it's actually going to help you unleash your personal power, help restore human dignity to yourself, and give yourself some self-respect and some self-love, because you deserve it. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.